It's very quiet in here.
No, should I say something?
This is the quietest bar I've ever been in.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, you were talking about that. Yeah, you're
Remain calm, citizens.
or something.
Hey.
You're working at Blue Jay.
There you are, Kev.
Hey, Graham.
Hello, Kevin.
Not enough drinking.
Okay, we got some
Yes.
more.
That must be the issue. We need more beverages.
Yes,
Clearly.
All right, let's
Cheers.
talk about this.
I said, well, nobody's talking in the Zoom meeting, so I'm saying
I
we need more beverages.
Some co-hosts, you were supposed to tell risque jokes about that time Gerald got a tattoo in the wrong place.
Oh my goodness.
So,
You know, I'm not sure what the etiquette of Zoom meetings are. Are we supposed to ask Kevin to show us if he's wearing pants or what?
I think
Kevin wants to
already know.
someone-
You run the risk of knowing the answer. I mean, that's the big question, right? Do you really want
Yeah,
to know that answer?
If
Like,
there's
really?
stone there, I do apologize for doing that. I didn't realize my meeting was still on. Hi, Karen.
you know, I didn't see that, and I'm going to just say pics or it didn't happen. So you're going to have to share that later on, okay?
Oh, it's going down in my book of memories. Okay, I think, okay, I just sent Gerald and Victoria the bios, so they should be in your email.
I got it.
Okay,
Yep.
you got them, Gerald?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool. So, and Graham's still here somewhere. There he is.
I'm here.
You said you'd smile.
He is smiling.
Come on, perk up. Let's see those twinkling those tooths. Okay, and one sec. I just have to check on my far, far better half.
Huh?
Oh, there you are. Okay, she's
I'm here.
okay. It's like there's a lot of people here. Oh, and Dan Brown is here. Ask him about the Da Vinci Code.
I was about to say.
Okay, so we're, 10 minutes? That's not bad. Okay, so are you ready to go, Graham?
I am ready to go.
Okay, and I'll just quietly let everyone else in. David just joined somewhere. And, oh, I see. If you want a close-up on Graham, you can just hit the button up.
Speaker view. Mhm.
Okay. And there's David, and we got people, and okay. So do you want Gerald or Victoria? Do one of you want to do the intro for Graham?
Okay, I guess I'll do it.
Okay.
Let me just find it here. Oh, here, okay. Graham Powell okay, hold on. Graham Powell has been a fan of Private Eye stories since he read The Hardy Boys and Encyclopedia Brown. He's been writing stories since the late 90s and slowly improved until his first sale to Thrilling Detective back in 2002. He's published in many venues since then, including the forthcoming All Private Eye issue of Black Cat magazine, which I didn't get into.
I did.
A professional computer engineer for over 35 years. He now lives in Houston, Texas.
Yeah. Actually, that's
Good luck.
25 years. 25.
Oh, 25. Okay.
I typed it wrong, so it's not your fault. My fault.
Okay, sorry about that.
So, all right, just to introduce this, this is a story from an anthology that I know Mark Troy, who was on here tonight, was also in, called The Eyes of Texas last year. And it was a really good anthology. I know Rick Helms' selection from that got included in one of the Year's End Best Mystery Story collections, and nominated for a Derringer Award, I believe another one was. And so I would not be surprised if some of them got nominated for Shamus Awards later on this year. Anyway, this is a story called Blackbirds. by Graham Powell. Andy Wilkins drove up Highway 59 towards Jefferson, Texas, rolling along between the cotton fields that stretched out on the side of the road. A little ways off to the east, a thin line of pine trees marked the edge of Big Cypress Bayou. In the days after the Civil War, sharecroppers picked the cotton, ginned it, packed it into bales, and loaded it onto barges. The barges floated down the bayou and across Caddo Lake into Louisiana, then on down the Red River and the Mississippi to the market in New Orleans. Back then, Jefferson was a prosperous place. A few years later, the railroad came through Marshall to the south, and Jefferson was left to slowly fade into genteel decay. Downtown Jefferson was not large, just 6 blocks by 4, faithfully restored to the appearance at its peak. Buildings of red or tan brick with their high, narrow windows, once warehouses and banks, now house bed and breakfasts, museums, and theaters. Smaller buildings held restaurants and offices. Every block had its antique shop. Andy found a parking space on Polk Street, then looked around for a moment and went into the hardware store on the corner and straight through to the counter at the back. The counterman looked up and smiled. "Help you, son?" "Yes," said Andy. "A friend of mine used to come in here all the time. His name is Jack Lynch. Have you seen him lately?" He tried the restaurant next door, then the used bookstore beyond that, then the cotton broker's hotel. Nobody knew Jack Lynch. In less than an hour, he'd made his way from down Dallas Street and Austin Street and halfway down Lafayette, asking questions at every stop and always getting a shake of the head or a shrug. The drugstore had an old-timey soda fountain, and the Texas sun was hot, so he stopped and had a chocolate shake. He saw the policeman coming towards him as soon as he stepped outside. 50-ish maybe, a small man with gently graying hair and a neat mustache. "Are you the one who's been asking all the questions?" he said. "That's me," said Andy. "I'm Chief Abbott. Let's have a talk." Abbott looked up from the papers on his desk. "Aren't you a little young to be a private eye?" "I'm 26. I've been doing this for 5 years now. I'm not a rookie." The police station was an ugly brown building tucked behind the county courthouse. It had probably seemed right at home when it was built in the late 70s, but among all the stately old buildings, it was jarring. "This Lynch fella," said Abbott. "What do you want him for? Is he some kind of criminal?" "He hasn't got any wants or warrants. His full name is John David Lynch. A relative of his passed away." "Foul play? Some kind of funny business?" said Abbott. "No," said Andy. "Liver cancer. Took its time, too." He paused. "But there's some money, so the estate hired me to find Lynch. He hasn't spoken to the deceased in a long time, but the family heard he might be in Jefferson." "You came all the way from Fort Worth for that?" "I've worked with his attorney before, and he trusts me. What's the other option? Bring in someone from Shreveport?" Abbott pulled at his chin. "Can't say that I've noticed anybody new in town, not to stay. We get a lot of tourists, of course. You mind if I look around a little, see if I can turn up any leads?" "That's no problem. It's not against the law after all, and I do appreciate your asking. Please be polite, though. We're a bit old-fashioned about our manners, and let me know how it goes." "I'll do that," said Andy as he collected his license. "Thanks for your time." All the folks in the shops downtown were eager to help, but nobody knew anything about Lynch. Not much more than an hour passed before Andy ran out of places to look. After that, he started on the side streets, the ones farther out. He rounded a corner onto Lafayette. Halfway down the block, the sign jutted out from a building, the Hobby Horse Arts and Crafts. Andy pulled a well-creased envelope from his pocket, glanced at it, and though he damn well knew what it said, checked it against the sign. Satisfied, he stuffed it back in his pocket. Through the window, he saw shelves lined with glass figurines, miniature birdhouses, rough clay pots in bright colors, and other knickknacks. As he reached for the door, he caught a glimpse of his reflection and pulled up short. It took a moment or two to arrange his face into a smile. His reflection said, "Who do you think you're fooling?" A bell over the door jingled as he entered, and a woman's voice called, "Be right with you." Another minute, and a young woman pushed through a swinging door from the back, wiping her hands on a rag. Her hair was black with streaks of cyan, magenta, and yellow, and there were smears of paint and dried clay on her smock. She said, "Sorry, I was working on a new piece. What can I do for you?" Andy looked around at the crowded shelves. "Is all this stuff yours? I mean, did you make it? You like it?" She smiled. "I don't have the tools to work in glass, but yeah, the pots and the paintings and stuff are all mine." "I'm Sally," she said, holding out a grubby hand. "What can I do for you?" Andy shook hands gingerly. "My name is Andrew Wilkins. I'm afraid I'm not actually here to shop. I'm a private investigator from Fort Worth, and I was hoping you might be able to help me find a man named Jack Lynch. I've heard he's here in Jefferson. Do you know him?" She shook her head. "Is he a tourist? I get a lot of out-of-town trade." "I understand he's living here." Andy wiped his face. "If he is, he's being awful quiet about it. Can I get you a glass of water or something? You look beat." Thanks, that would be nice. I've been at this all morning and haven't learned a damn thing. Everyone's sure nice, but you ask questions and suddenly it's New York City. Nobody knows nothing. Around here, they probably don't know nothing, said Sally as she retrieved 2 glasses from behind the counter. Maybe you just need to somebody to show you around. You know, a local. Like you. Andy pointed to the snake tattoo that wound along her forearm. This place is like Mayberry. People from Mayberry don't have that kind of ink. How'd you end up here? Huh, so you really are a detective. I grew up here, went off to college at the Art Institute in Dallas, and spent a few years there before I came back and opened the shop. She filled a glass and handed it to Andy. He took a long drink. All right, so you're a local. So tell me where I should start looking. She pulled a face. Is this guy on the run or something, hiding out? Or is he the bed and breakfast type? More like Motel 6. There's a cheap place on Highway 59 down towards Marshall. Andy shook his head. Tried it this morning. An older couple came into the shop and browsed for a few minutes without buying anything. When they'd gone, Andy said, I can see you're busy and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Maybe we could get together later and talk over the places this lynch might be. Sally cocked her head and a smile slowly spread across her face. I don't know. You seem like kind of a shady character, she laughed. Well, what the hell? Where do you want to meet? I saw a place called Flagler's in the square. Is any good? Good? It's the best place in town. Let's leave it at that. Meet at 7? I'll see you then, said Andy. Directly across the street from Hobby Horse was an old beat-up auto repair shop. Through an open overhead door, Andy saw a big Buick up on a lift. Sign read Garage and Parts. Andy hesitated, then crossed over and went in. The guy behind the counter was maybe in his 30s, with long hair and a beard, dressed in greasy jeans and a uniform shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The name tag read, Dave. What can I do for you? He said, beaming. I'm looking for a friend of mine. He's kind of a car nut. You know Jack Lynch? Lynch, said Dave. Drives an old Firebird? Andy felt his adrenaline surge. That's right, an old 81. Has he been in lately? Nah, man, not for a while. I only remember because I had to scrounge up a turbocharger for him a while back. That's just hard to find these days. Any idea where he's living? Dave frowned. Not that I remember. Car came in on a hook and he picked it up himself. He'd come by for parts a few times since then. The dude knows his cars, though. Last time he was in, he asked if I could work on a Porsche. That'd be awesome. Get into the hood of one of those. A car pulled up outside and honked. Dave said, sorry, man, I got to handle this. That's okay, said Andy. I can come back later. You close at 5? The pawn shop was just past the north end of downtown by the welfare office and the Family Dollar. Jack Lynch's name brought only a shrug from the clerk. Look around, he said. You see anything you like? Let me know. Andy looked at the old televisions and stereos, the rows of musical instruments, the costume jewelry heaped on a tray, and stopped in front of the glass case with the guns. Let me take a look at that one, he said. It was a Colt 45 automatic, old and well used. Bare metal showed through the bluing in several places, and the walnut grips were worn nearly smooth. A barely legible inscription on the barrel read, Staff Sergeant Warren Lewis. How much, said Andy. $75. Andy laid 420s on the counter. As the clerk fished the claim check from a metal box, Andy snuck a glance at the name of the person who'd hawked it. And that's it.
Great.
Yay!
Yeah, and you could
That stopped too soon.
find it. Well, that was 8 minutes. I clocked it earlier, so didn't want to take up everybody else's time. Besides, I know that I know that some of y'all have copies of the book at least. I'm pretty sure that Mark Troy does. He's got.
I've got a copy, Graham, and you did stop too soon. It's an engaging story. I really liked it. I thought this was one of the best stories.
What was the title again?
Blackbirds. So.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a good story, Graham, and everybody needs to read it if you don't have a copy.
Yeah, I'll find it.
I can't remember who wrote it, but one of the other great stories in that book was Shaft on Wheels, right, Mark?
Yeah, I think that was in there too. It's yeah.
There's
But you know, yours is really one of the tops.
You know, it was a great anthology. I mean, I personally have no trouble saying that there were at least 2 or 3 other stories that were the equal of mine and probably better. So yeah, it was. You know, it's a great anthology, and anyone who likes private eye stories really would enjoy it. I think the Kindle edition is only like $5 if you want that. But anyway, I've probably said enough, so I'll turn it over to whoever's next here. Unless, I don't know if we're gonna have a discussion or whatever. But
no, I wasn't planning to. Now I've got something on my screen that won't go away as usual. Um, you notice that Josh and I both disappeared for a while. Our dogs told us there was someone leaving a vital message at our front door. So
Should preserve the mystery. Let
Yeah,
them
I know.
wonder.
here we
Yeah,
go.
while I was reading, my son was rinsing out. This room is next to the kitchen. He was rinsing out a glass in the kitchen and getting some water stuff.
Oh, I can't.
Trying to get hand signals so he can.
I can't show this to you, but it's a lovely little pamphlet from some church that wants me to know what happens after I die. So feel
Aw.
free to stay around after this, and I'll read it very slowly for 5 or 6 hours. So I'm sure it's full of interesting stuff. As you can see, we do have dogs, and I apologize for this. Here comes someone else. I just realized that we're divided into 2 screens now, which is rather interesting.
Not me.
Okay.
Oops.
Something very bizarre going on here. 1 second. Let me double check who's next, because I have no idea anymore.
According to my list, it's Mark Troy. Yeah,
We're going to Mark.
yeah.
Okay. And 1 second, let me get back to wherever it was I once belonged. Zoom meeting. Yes, and I still have that annoying thing. Someone wanted to know if they could explain after they're introduced. Yes, you may, Ron, when it's your turn. You can explain to us what's happening, because they may wonder why a woman's voice is coming out of that throat of yours. We're doing a lot of cross-gender stuff here, so it's no one auto me, please. Okay, so do you want to do Mark, Victoria?
Certainly. Mark Troy is the author of 2 detective novels, the Seamus-nominated Pilikia Is My Business and The Splintered Paddle. His recent short stories include Shaft on Wheels, which appears in the 2019 anthology The Eyes of Texas, and Dos Tacos Guatemaltecos y una Pistola Casera, coming in December in the Guns and Tacos series. A member of Private Eye Writers of America, Mystery Writers of America, and Partners in Crime, when not spilling blood on the page, he mixes knock-you-on-your-ass tiki cocktails and plinks out surf tunes on the ukulele. Mark.
Thank you. And as Kevin mentioned, we've got some cross-gender stories here. So this is going to be a cross-gender story. This story is a Val Lyon story. I was writing Val Lyon stories for a while, and Kevin and the Thrilling Detective published this one, which I was really pleased for them to do. It was, I think it was published in 2009. The story is called Horns, and let me tell you just a little bit about it. The Val Lyon short stories have always involved something dealing with sports, and I was kind of inspired by an article in Sports Illustrated about a guy who was a rodeo clown and wanted to be the guy in the barrel in the rodeo. If you're familiar with rodeos, it's a really dangerous spot to be in. And then about that time, a call came out for submissions for an anthology called Sex, Lies, and Private Eyes. Each story had to have sex, lies, and private eyes in it. And so I wrote this one, and it made the cut, got into the anthology, but then the anthology never happened. It was put off for a couple years and finally ended. Finally, they discontinued the project. So I decided to so I decided to send this off to Kevin, and I was happy that they did it. The story is called Horns because it does involve bull riding. It also involves sex, or some sex. Horns because Everybody in the story wants sex. Not everybody gets it. The bull maybe gets it. But here's the beginning of Horns. Let me just wet my throat a little bit. And as I said, this is a cross-gender story. I've never read this one before, but the narrator, it's in first person, and the narrator is Lanyon, a female private eye in Honolulu. So you have to imagine this is a feminine voice. Horns. Doyle Gillespie bellowed in a voice as loud as his shirt, a yellow and red hangover of martini glasses and hula girls. Sperm jacking, he said. Somebody's getting to my bulls, taking the goblins right out of the pike, you might say. Gillespie smiled at his own wit. I took a long pull on my tonic and lime, hoping it would settle my stomach, wishing I'd ordered it with vodka. Sperm jacking? How can you tell? I asked, keeping my own voice low. We sat at a beachside table at Duke's in Waikiki. I choose public places to meet prospective clients, but this time I regretted the decision. A bull is a sperm-making machine, Miss Lanyon, and the championship stuff gets top dollar from breeders. My sperm is the best there is anywhere. Dozens of heads turned in our direction. A bull's balls produce all the time, but you ejaculate him too often, you get fewer wigglies per cup of snot. The count doesn't drop much, but even a small dip tells me what's going on. Doesn't that happen naturally sometimes? I tried recalling my college biology from too many years earlier. Not if he's healthy. Maybe your bull got himself in the corral with a willing cow. I was searching for familiar territory. As a private investigator, I'd followed plenty of roaming spouses. Gillespie shook his head. It's the cowboys get the action at rodeos, not the bulls. What would anybody do with stolen sperm, I asked. He favored me with the kind of expression most people reserve for idiot children. Sell it, missy. Black market. Hell, everybody wants to breed champions, but nobody's willing to pay full price. They all want a piece of me. His face reddened almost the shade of his shirt. I need you to find the bastard. You're asking me to find a thief with sticky fingers? All of a sudden, a career in telemarketing had extraordinary appeal. Gillespie snorted. You give a hand job to a cowboy, you use a machine on a bull, and ejack you later. Not your everything but the smell sex shop cooter either. We're talking about a serious science collector. I glanced at the ocean, only yards away from where we sat, so blue you couldn't tell where water met sky. The sweet smell of oil from hundreds of sunbathers wafted around us. Without a vet payment to make, I'd be on the beach faster than you could say bull's balls. Instead, I was trapped blowhard talking about his randy bulls. Do you have any suspects, I asked? A clown named Higa. Clown? My fee's the same whether he's a clown or a bastard. They told me you got a smart mouth, missy. Quality work, a package that's easy on the eyes, but a smart mouth. So far, they're right about the package and the mouth. Higa's a rodeo clown. Why Higa? Jealousy. I made it in the business. He failed. If he tried digging holes to piss in, he'd screw it up. He sees me and knows what I got is out of reach, but that don't stop him from wanting it. Here's the kicker, though. Gillespie leaned forward like he was sharing a secret. Lately, the dumb bastard is living large. New truck, big show-off watch. What does that tell you? He came into money? Bingo. A rodeo clown gets 200, 250 tops of performance. That ain't putting gas in his new truck. He sat back and checked out his own show-off watch. Right now, I've got a container load of bulls on its way to Makawa Rodeo. Makawa Rodeo, in a state with a 2 centuries old cowboy culture, where summer means rodeo on every island, the event in Makawa, Maui was a jewel. A trip to Maui would be worth a lot of bullshit. You expect Higa to be at the rodeo? You're catching on, he said. All right, as long as I don't have to cuff him when I find him, I'll draw up the standard contract. Just so we're clear, Gillespie, you're paying for the work and that's all you get. Fine, he said. Your smart mouth I can do without, but you can't stop me looking at the package. I used the excuse of paperwork to get away from Gillespie as quickly as possible. After preparing the contract and giving it to a courier, I requested a background check on Gillespie Buckards, my client's breeding business. So Val goes to Makawao and she's adopting a cover as someone who's in the bull business, breeding business on a small ranch and looking to buy some black market sperm. There she meets a cowboy and decides she needs to seduce him to find out what's going on. And that's where the sex part of this story comes in. So let me get to that. She and the cowboy have a date. Val dresses up in her best dress. The cowboy's there. They have dinner. And it picks up here where they're at dinner. Conversation with Lance was easy and unforced. Lance Dawkins is the name of the cowboy. Conversation with Lance was easy and unforced. He told me stories of the cowboy life on the circuit. How much longer can you ride? I asked. As long as I have something to ride, he said. That sounded like a proposition. We headed back to my hotel. I didn't wait for the elevator doors to slide shut before making the first tentative kiss. His response was anything but tentative. His lips were warm and his tongue insistent. By the time we reached my room, I was ready. I yanked at the snaps on his shirt. They came open with satisfying pops. I raked my fingers through the hair on his chest. Just so you know, cowboy, I expect this event to last longer than 8 seconds. He hoisted my dress and tore at my panties. No problem, lady. But there was a problem. In spite of our desire and efforts, the only thing that rose was frustration. The desire petered out after about 3/4 of an hour. Our effort lasted a little longer. Finally, he rolled off me. Sorry, he said. Don't worry, this can happen sometimes. I put too much pressure on you. He cradled me in his arms. It's not you. Sure, I couldn't help feeling ineffectual. I tried to push those ugly emotions away. Honest, it's happened before. They make pills for this, you know. I've tried them. I've taken so many, my vision turned blue like I was looking at the world underwater. My doctor says I have nerve damage from riding too many bulls. I got out of bed. You could have told me. I'd have understood. Look, Val, I thought I had a chance for something different with you. When I saw you, I was sure it would work this time. Don't get steamed about it. I wasn't steamed, just disappointed. So
That is so cool.
I thought it would be funny to have a cowboy who can't get it up, which is not what cowboys like to hear about. But so Val then the lies come. Val goes, takes a shower. She comes back out and she finds that Lance has been going through her purse and has discovered that she's not who she pretended to be, that she's a private investigator. And then shortly after that, they discover that Higa was murdered. I won't go on and tell you how the whole story comes out, but I will point out that, as Chekhov said, if you jack a bull in the first act, you'd better ride him in the last act. And that's what happens here. Val gets to ride the bull.
Yeah, that was writing advice from a good old boy. I think he was from Plano, Texas, near where Kevin lives, right?
Yeah, probably we're around Kevin's territory.
Chekhov, he was a real cowpoke.
Yeah, favorite Western writer.
Yeah. Actually, the full story is, I think it's still on Thrilling Detective. I don't think I transferred it, but I should.
And if it's not, I did actually republish it a couple years later in 2011, I think, in a collection called Game Face. So you can look at Thrilling Detective, or you can find it in Game Face.
And I believe it was you. One of your first books was available as on floppy disk, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had
Batman for Kindle.
You know, I did one story way back. I think my very first story was called The Car Hank Died In, and it was actually about some vampires who were trying to preserve the legacy of Hank Williams by killing everybody who wanted to be a Hank Williams style singer. And that was published on a CD called Deep in the Horror of Texas. And I don't know if that's available anywhere at all.
Hey guys, thanks so much for everything. I gotta duck out to another Zoom call.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for dropping by.
That's Tim. Take care, all.
Okay, bye.
You'll have to excuse the commotion behind me. Our dogs are trying to kill each other. I'm going to mute myself, and I'll let Gerald introduce Ron, if that's okay, everyone.
Okay by me.
Okay, and then Ron wants to say something before he starts to do whatever, before I play the audio recording of what's happening. Okay, so excuse me while I separate our dogs. Okay, and ladies and gentlemen, my good friend, and the legend is true, Mr. Gerald So.
Okay, Ron Miller, thank you. Ron Miller is an illustrator author with more than 60 books to his credit. He specializes in science, astronomy, and science fiction. The fiction he has written includes a fantasy steampunk series and Velda, a hard-boiled detective story. This has spun off a collection of short stories, a novella, 4 radio plays, a series of comic books, recently gathered into 3 volumes by Caliber Comics. Velda was inspired by reading a couple of hundred vintage paperbacks Ron brought back from Mexico decades ago, which is when he fell in love with the work of writers ranging from Henry Kane and Richard Prather to Robert Leslie Bellum and G.G. Fickling. He's got several of Kevin has several of Ron's Velda stories and Thrilling Detective, including a couple of her comic adventures, which recall to, let's see, Kevin at least, the wacky Sally the Sleuth comic strips that used to appear in Spicy Detective back in the 1940s. And there you go.
I couldn't have said it better if I'd written it myself. Somebody has sent me this. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Yes.
The oldest city police force. Anyway, I'm not too sure if I'm on or not. All I see is you. Oh,
You are
hello.
on.
Right.
I am on. Okay, good.
Yeah.
As he was saying, I had never read a hard-boiled detective story in my life until about 30 years ago, when I brought back 3 cartons full of vintage paperbacks from Mexico City. And I figured if I had them, I bought them for the cover art, which were lurid detective stories from the 40s and 50s. I had them. I can't have a book and not read it. I read them, fell in love with them, and realized there weren't very many female detectives in them. You know, there's Henny West, and that was about it. So I figured somebody needed to have a hard-boiled 1950s female detective. And because I wanted one and nobody had one, I had to write it myself. So I thought that the reading I would have tonight would be the first chapter of the first thing I ever wrote about Velma, which is the novel, which everything else is spun off from. And since it's told in Velda's own words, it seemed funny to me to have my voice telling it. And since my wife provided the voice of Velda in the 2 little videos I've done, I thought it'd be appropriate to have her do the reading. So the chapter 1 is kind of truncated. I took the middle out where some other stuff happens and just left the beginning and end where she deals with this slimy little character she meets in Plankton Key, Florida. So it was her first reading and couldn't do a second one. So there's a few little stumbles, but I think she did a pretty good job. So.
Okay, so now I play it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so
well, otherwise I'll just platter along for the next half hour.
Okay, now as you can hear from that outburst of noise in the middle of Ron's intro, this is new for all of us, so you may want to adjust your volume a bit, but I'm going to try and share an audio recording with you of Judith Miller reading from Ron Miller's Velda. Did I get that right? Okay, here we go.
Close enough.
Okay, and here we go.
I get off the bus in Plankton Key, Florida, and it's like stepping in front of a glassblower's furnace. The dank tropical heat hits me in the face like a blow from a wet army blanket. It's as easy to breathe as
Cut it out.
that seems to penetrate even the shadows. My body is instantly wet with perspiration, which the oversaturated air refuses to accept. So instead of cooling me like nature intended, it just covers me with a salty, sticky coating. Droplets of sweat trickle from my armpits, trickling like little insects I can feel like a salty delta, forming as sweat funnels between my breasts. Welcome to the Florida Keys, I tell myself, and a new record for instant misery. My $20 white silk blouse clings to me like wet tissue. I could have saved my money, I figure, and used a 50-cent box of damp Kleenex to the same effect. There's a punk-looking guy sitting on a beach just outside the door of the station. He must be waiting for God himself to get off the bus, since I can see no other reason to sit outside in the heat. He doesn't strike me as a religious type, though. He's trying to look cool in his cheap seersucker suit, but he's no better an actor than he is a dresser, which isn't much. He's sweating like a cheap hot dog, which he more than little resembles. He's peering over the top of a limp racing sheet, scanning the platform like a weasel looking for a baby bird to drop out of its nest. He spots me and drops a perfect John Fiddleson double take. I do tend to stand out in the crowd. I'd laugh if I could breathe, but I'm making a beeline for the station door, which bears a sign reading, "Air conditioning inside," in blue letters with little icicles hanging from them. It draws me like the North Pole attracted Perry. Weasel, though, unfolds himself from the bench like 5 feet of carpenter's rule and intercepts me 4 paces from the door. He's a skinny little runt who barely reaches my collarbone. His limp straw hat has a wide brown stain around the band, and his suit looks damp enough to wrinkle like a sponge, which is a dreadful thought as I ever had. He has a voice like someone with a really bad sinus infection. "Hey, new in town, huh? How about a show you around?" I look at him with exactly the same fascination which Rockefeller would regard a wooden nickel. I've been around, I tell him as I push by. He squelches a little like a wet dishcloth, and finally I get into the refrigerated station. The air inside is so frosty, I think for a moment that my more fragile bits may snap off with a sudden change in temperature, and my coating of itchy sweat suddenly congeals into a clammy slime. There's not much inside other than a couple of old benches with limp bored people draped on them and a ticket counter. I go up to the old man behind the cage and ask, "Any place to get a cold drink around here?" It doesn't seem to me to require a whole lot of thought, but oddly it's been a long time since anyone asked him for any more information than the time of the next bus, and the old man is a little taken aback by my unexpected call on his wisdom. He mulls the question for a while, savoring the moment as he massages his gums with his tongue. I glance over my shoulder, and there's Weasel looking through the window at me. He turns away so quickly he bumps into a fat woman carrying a kid, and she lays into him like he's just tried to murder or something. Meanwhile, the old man's telling me there's a fine bar just across the highway, which I wouldn't have thought to have been such a hard thing to have remembered, but then I'm not an old man stuck behind a ticket counter at a podunk bus station. I can see the bar on the other side of about 40 feet of nearly liquid asphalt shimmering in the heat like a mirage. It looks as far away as Timbuktu, if Timbuktu is where I think it is. I can just imagine someone someday finding my bleached bones scattered across the median line. I take a deep breath before leaving the station. It's like swimming through molten glass, but I make it. The tavern isn't air conditioned, but the inside is dark and cool and dank as a cave, even if it does smell like stale beer and cigarettes. When I get back to the bar, the bartender has another beer waiting for me, along with a scrap of paper with some directions scrawled on it in a thick pencil. "It's on the house, lady. Don't get too many tourists and plankton this early in the season, especially ones like you. Figure it as a thank you from me." "Thanks, but I guess I'm not really a tourist. Got a little business to take care of." I tap the note with a fingertip. "How far from here?" "Dunno, 5-6 miles maybe." "I don't suppose there's any cabs around here." "Yeah, sure." He thinks I've made a joke. "Any chance I can get something to eat?" "I got some ham and Swiss. You want a sandwich? Wonder Bread, that's about it." I tell him that would be swell because Wonder Bread helps build my strong body 8 ways, and I take my beer to a table where I can see the blazing street. After a while, I'm thinking, my, I wonder why someone living in this 2-bit town would need to call to find out where someone lives. It's an island, for God's sakes. No place on it could be more than a spitting distance from any other, which brought up a pretty nasty mental picture. While I'm wondering who the bartender had called, I see a familiar figure coming out of the station and bet my last dollar is going to come over here. I win the buck for myself, as I expected I would, as the wheezy little guy comes trotting across the half-molten pavement and sure enough comes straight to the door of the bar. He tries not to notice me as he comes in, and the effort is so obvious he may as well be gawking right in my face. He gets the beer from the barkeep, and even though every other table is empty, he looks around as though he's trying to decide where to sit. He finally comes over to where I'm sitting. Big surprise. I figure chances are good he's the one the bartender called. God knows why. "Anyone sitting here?" "Yeah, my pal, the Invisible Man." Mistakenly taking this as an invitation, he plucks himself down with an audible squish. He sucks on his beer for a minute, his eyes self-consciously avoiding mine. He's so nervous I begin to wonder if I'm going to see him actually dissolve before my eyes. "Say, miss, I wonder if I ought to try to make things easier for him, but I figure what the hell, so I just stare at him. His eyes skitter under my glaze like olives avoiding a dull fork. He mumbles some more, then finally makes a brave try at trying to get whatever his point is. Look, sorry about back there. I didn't mean to sound fresh or nothing, just trying to be friendly, helpful, like, you being new in town and all, He looks up at me hopefully. I don't give anything back but a stare. You gonna be in town long? Maybe, maybe not. Why do you ask? Well, you wouldn't be planning to go out, poke around town or anything like that, would you? I mean, that's not any of my business or nothing. And if it were your business, nothing, of course. That is, you being a stranger around here and all, I mean, you might not feel like some friendly advice. I'm hanging on your every word. Yeah, well, what I mean is, if you got a return ticket, well then, if I was you, I'd just stay around here till the next bus out of town. It's nice and cool in here. It's a good place to wait. Well, that's mighty interesting advice. You make plankton sound like kind of unhealthy for a poor little old city girl like me. I guess it could get kind of unhealthy. You're a healthy kind of guy, aren't you? What? How are you feeling? Okay, I guess. That's pretty tough then, I say, reaching across the table. I grab his tie and jerk it so hard his face bounces off the table like a tennis ball. He continues on backwards, toppling the chair all onto the floor. I glance up at the bartender, but he's got his back turned, pointedly polishing a perfectly clean glass. I get up and toss a tip on the table. I notice that there is a single tooth embedded in the center of a wet circle. It looks like a tiny tombstone. I go to the bar, retrieve my bag and the sandwich sitting next to it, thank the bartender for his hospitality, and insincerely apologize for leaving such a mess. I can't tell if the sarcasm's been lost on him since he still won't look at me, the bastard. I have to step over Weasel's face on my way out the door. He's still out, blowing a big red bubble through his nose that looks like a squashed tomato. Because I get cranky when I'm hot, I kick the face and the bubble goes blah. Thanks for the...
Whoops.
There you are.
I guess that's it. Okay, and now I can't see my window. Here it is. Okay.
Okay.
I can't talk unless I see myself. Thank you, Ron and Judith.
Well, thank you.
Apparently, someone had some noise going on there. Maybe when people are reading, if they could just hit mute, unless they want to heckle, in which case, cry havoc and let loose the dogs of heckling. Thank you. Ron has been a really good supporter of the site, and in fact, I think a couple of his gal Velda has shown up on a couple of the covers this last issue, and there's several of his short stories on the in the fiction section, including a couple of comic strip stories, which I don't know if it was intentional or not. But if any of you are familiar with the old pulps like Spicy Detective and that, there was a strip running there called Sally the Sleuth, which was a female private eye of sorts, but let's just say she wasn't exactly woke. Her method of crime fighting makes Charlie's Angels look like Sherlock Holmes. I mean, Sally the Sleuth's her MO was to spot something wrong, follow the bad guys, and get captured. Unfortunately, the only way to escape was to lose most of her clothing.
Whatever works.
Yeah, it worked for, I don't know, a decade or something. These were written by Robert Leslie Bellum, who also created
Dan Turner.
Whose Roscoe always spat ka-chow. So, and they were drawn by a guy called Alda Barrow. And I swear his artwork looks so much like what Ron did for those comic strips. In the comics era and another attitude, check out Sally Sleuth or even Ron's Velda strips on Thrilling Detective.
In the comic strips, Velda's gun always goes ka-chow as the tip of the hat to Bellum.
Yes. If none of you have ever read Robert Leslie Bellum, pour yourself a bottle of rot gut and enjoy, because the man had a way with words. Was it the right way? We don't know, but it was a way, definitely. Okay, next up, I have two really great people coming together to make one great taste sensation. We have former editors here of Thrilling Detective, Gerald So and Victoria Esposito. And let me just go and read what I got from them to say about them. And I'll probably stick more or less to some sort of truth. I'll start off with their very first fiction editor, Victoria. She now walks the mean streets of Albany, New York, where she is a legal aid lawyer tackling systemic problems throughout northeastern New York. In previous lives, she has been a college instructor, a Kelly girl, a factory worker, an assistant district attorney, and the co-founder and editor of Handheld Crime and the Coffee Cup Press. She's delighted to be back in touch with so many Thrilling Detective alumni, and especially honored to be back reading on behalf of Gerald Hot Lips So tonight.
Oh my goodness.
Now, when Victoria left and broke my heart, I had to find shelter from the storm. Fortunately, Gerald was waiting there on a street corner wearing a trench coat and a silly grin. He is a Thrilling Detectives fiction editor from mid-2001 to 2009. He now edits the 5/2 weekly crime poetry site at poemsoncrime.blogspot.com. I kid him a lot, but he's my brother in arms, and I just think you should all give him a big hand of applause. And Victoria now is going to, as soon as I get back to Zoom, because I was reading somewhere else, so I was horribly distracted. Victoria is going to read a story that Gerald wrote that features the female protagonist. So, ladies and gentlemen, without much further ado, though I could go on for days and often have, Miss Victoria Esposito reading for Mr. Gerald So.
Thank you. Fred by Gerald So. Florida sun shining, Lisa Regina saw herself in car windows. Cat-eye shades, crop top, short shorts. 28, trying to feel 18. But hey, it was her day off, and 10 years as a PI had bought her Fred, a firecracker red Jeep Wrangler Sport. Out of habit, she stopped by her old Honda Civic. The space next to it was Fred's. The empty space, it hit her. Someone had snatched her new toy. Before she called the police, she had her own suspect. He often ran before dawn. While she slept in, he could have swiped her spare key, stolen Fred, and cabbed back for his car. The spare key should have been in her bedside drawer. She didn't see it. Who else but he could have it? You've reached Josh Wallace's mobile. Leave me a mess. Nope. She wanted to yell at him, not his voicemail. Searching Josh Wallace, environmental law, got his smiling face into office phone. Mr. Wallace is out, his secretary said, with a personal emergency. Lisa tensed. What emergency? He didn't say. If you'd like to leave your name. No need. Thank you. She had a right to know if the emergency involved Fred. Her old Civic could reach Josh's apartment in half an hour. She freshened up and wore a business suit. Neither the Jeep nor Josh's Prius was in his parking lot. To be sure he wasn't home, Lisa had to do more. No response at Josh's buzzer. She tried others until she got into the building. Josh's door, 3A, was intact and locked. Mrs. Ruiz from 3B caught Lisa with her hand on the knob. "What are you doing?" Lisa faced the older woman. "Have you seen Josh today, Mrs. Ruiz?" "No. Why?" "He skipped work and isn't answering his mobile." "Maybe he's avoiding you." Lisa held up her PI photo ID. "He was fine with me last night. Today he's missing. I know he gave you an emergency key." Mrs. Ruiz drew back. "He said you were a travel agent." Lisa nodded. "That's what he thinks." "Is he in trouble?" "I hope not." Mrs. Ruiz relented, knocking on the door. "Josh, it's Mrs. Ruiz and Lisa Regina." After 2 minutes without response, she used the key. Lisa followed her in, noting both Josh's bicycles on their wall mounts. He had a good sofa. Where others might put a TV, various books filled 4 IKEA Billy cases. He kept the kitchen nook spotless. They surveyed the bedroom, the bathroom, the closets. Furtively, Lisa looked for her missing key too. No luck. "It's all the same," Mrs. Ruiz observed. "He's just not here." Lisa agreed and thanked her. Back in the Civic, she checked her phone. Nothing new from Josh. His mobile rang and went to voicemail again. Neither ready to report Josh missing nor Fred stolen, she drove home. Pulling into her condo lot, she saw Josh's Prius in a guest space and Josh himself parking Fred. All 3 looked fine. She parked and got out of the Civic, meeting Josh on his way to her. "Sorry, Lisa," he said. I thought I'd be back before you got up." "Back from where?" "Orlando Auto Glass. A storm blew through overnight. An oak branch smashed Fred's windshield." She grimaced. He pointed to the tree. "I saw it at sunrise. Luckily, your landscapers came around then. I asked/paid them to remove the branch. Then I had Fred towed to the shop. They replaced the windshield in an hour, but advised waiting 2 hours for the adhesive to cure. I did, and here we are." He offered her the spare key. She took it, torn between kissing him and punching him. "Want to drive?" he asked. "Not just yet." Back in her condo, he said, "I saw your calls. I thought I'd spare you." "You told me squat. If your car and I went missing, what would you do?" "Call the cops? Did you?" "No." "Wait, why didn't you?" Lisa held up her PI photo ID and told him. Better she than Mrs. Ruiz.
Very nice.
Yeah, excellent.
I don't know if Gerald
that
has.
was great.
Thank you. That is the end.
That's great.
Thank you.
Well, that really does sound like the beginning of a typical private eye story, except then it's not. Where could the assistant be? Somebody out of jail taking his revenge.
But oops, it was the boyfriend being nice.
Now, where is he? Oh, there he is, right in the middle. The typographically challenging A.B. Patterson, who's A.B. Patterson I couldn't cut and paste because it thought it was a list.
Did it really? Oh, of course it did. Yeah.
I pasted A.B. Patterson and I hit return, and suddenly there was a B and a bracket and a dot, and so slight word malfunction. Okay, whose turn is it to introduce the suspicious character from a country where they spell color with a U? Gotta watch those guys. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Victoria Esposito will now introduce Mr. Typographically challenging Andrew Patterson.
A.B. Patterson is an Australian writer who knows firsthand about corruption, power, crime, and sex. He was a detective sergeant in the Western Australia Police, working in pedophilia and vice, and later a chief investigator with the New South Wales Independent Commission Against Corruption. He is now a licensed PI and works self-employed as a consultant investigator to pay the bills. The rest of the time, he writes crime fiction. His debut novel, Harry's World, introduced the jaded and flawed PI Harry Kenmare. Harry's Quest was the sizzling and award-winning sequel. He has had short stories published in Switchblade magazine and Iconoclast Review. His Harry Kenmare short stories are about to be published as a collection. Harry Kenmare PI, at your service. His hard-boiled, gritty, and noir writing style has been likened to that of Raymond Chandler and Ken Bruin. He makes no apologies for telling it how it is. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've taken two scenes from a short story called Wankers. I do warn in advance there is some expletive language, as anybody who has read my stories before will be aware. So the story is based on Harry having a missing girl case to look into. So the first scene sets the scene, so to speak, and then there's a scene of some action as we move on a little bit further. The following afternoon, I started with the wank tanks, what polite society referred to in hushed tones as peep shows. The street name is rather more accurate. I knew four main ones. The first three yielded nothing. Now, there's no such thing as an upmarket wank tank, but there are degrees of grubbiness, and I left the least grubby until last. I walked down the dimly lit stairs to voyeurs and vixens. I pressed the buzzer and smiled at the camera. The secure door wasn't there to try and keep anyone out as such, since these businesses wanted all the visiting desperados they could get. It was simply a delaying mechanism for the occasions the coppers turned up. The rules said the shows could only have one girl performing alone. Live sex was not allowed. Of course, girl-on-girl action was where the revenue lay. So the door delay meant a warning light could be flashed in the performance chamber, and one girl could scamper swiftly out the back door, leaving one worked-up tart to play with herself. And so that is what the coppers always got to see, only they didn't have to pay. The door clicked, and I stepped into the dingy cabin beyond. I walked over to the customer counter. Gazza, the manager, and a regular information source and sometime drinking buddy of mine, was sitting behind it. I also occasionally slung him some work doing static surveillance for me, helped me out in busy times, and helped him pay his rent and booze bills. Gazza, formerly Sergeant Gary Dawes of the Australian Commando Regiment, was minus a leg, several metres of intestines, and half his face. His disability and disfigurement didn't lead to massive employment options. He'd found out the hard way that the words from the Travelling Wilburys song about no one giving a damn were very true. In his case, the Australian government didn't give a rat's ass about him leaving his body parts by a roadside in Afghanistan, especially since he opened his mouth about the 14 dead school children who some scrotum in intel had determined were Taliban fighters hiding out. They'd locked him in a psych hospital when he came home, which probably fucked him up more than the Afghan assholes. But with his habit of posting virulent, anarchic rants on the internet, the government still hated him. Or so he told me repeatedly. So now, his compo cut off, Gazza had to scrape a living in here. His 12-hour shifts consisted of encouraging the girls to do as much dildo work as possible, preferably anal, great for business. Then cleaning up the booths every few hours. Bucket loads of sodden tissues and cum trails down the walls from the lazy fucks who didn't bother with the Kleenex. Yeah, Gazza was simply drowning in the gratitude of his country. So whenever I could, I gave him some work. How's it hanging, Gazza? Badly to the left, Harry, the old Afghan gate. We both laughed. We did every time, never tiring of the joke. Should have a bit of surveillance work in the next couple of weeks, mate. That'd be appreciated, brother. Cleaning up after these fuck stains barely covers the rent, let alone getting on the piss. The only upside of the girls. I pulled out the photo of Solara, along with 500 of my expenses money. Figured no informant deserved it more than Gazza. I slid the folded bundle across his counter, along with the photo. Geez, you're exceptionally generous today, Harry. Thanks, mate. Least I can do, brother. I tapped the photo. Yeah, absolutely, he said without blinking. I wouldn't forget her face, or those tits, or the ass. She's fucking smoking hot, that one. Working here then? He laughed. Of course, mate. Should be on in a couple of hours. We now skip forward. I woke up late the next morning. After meeting with Lara, I'd lubricated my fantasies rather generously at the Emerald Bar. I was getting dressed when the phone rang. I answered. G'day, Gazza. Everything okay? Don't know, Harry. A couple of sus-looking guys been snooping around the front and back. Mate, you run a wank tank. You attract sus guys like flies to shit. These two are different. I'm getting a vibe, Harry. Reckon they might be government coming for me. Gazza, I'm sure the fucking government, as much as they are, totally lost interest in you by now. Not that simple. A couple of things I haven't told you, mate. Can you drop in? Like soon? Yeah, of course, mate. See you shortly. Thanks, Harry. He rang off. I was inclined to put it down to Gaz's never-ending, although understandable, paranoia. His mind had become a quagmire of conspiracy theories. But he was a mate, and he'd asked for help. And true mates always answered the call. I got on my way to voyeurs and vixens. I pressed the buzzer at the front door, but to no avail, twice. Strange, I thought. I couldn't see anyone in the vicinity. Possible that Gazza had gone for a crap if there were no customers. I pulled out my phone and called him. It went to voicemail. Okay, that was more than strange. That was a warning sign. Gazza always had his phone, even in the crapper. I knew that from awful experience. I couldn't forget the call that sounded like boulders being dropped down a well. I legged it around the block to the back entrance in the laneway. The normally locked door was resting on its latch. I wished that I'd packed my .38. I had an ominous feeling about this. And my old gut instinct was seldom wrong. Not that I'd always listened attentively. My personal life bore a painful testament to that. I slipped inside silently. I could hear Gaz's articulate defiance. Fuck you, cunts. Then another male voice. We'll see about that, asshole. A loud smack of flesh on flesh. Then another. I moved down the short corridor and found one of Gaz's girls, stark naked, hiding in the doorway to the performance chamber. I leant in to whisper in her ear, trying not to get distracted by her delectable body. I'm Harry, a friend of Gazza. Lissa, she sighed in my ear. She smelt floral and edible. How many of them? 2 I saw. Know who they are? No, never seen them before, but they've been hurting him. See if you can find anything to use as a weapon and then follow me. Like what? Something you can do some damage with. I moved stealthily forward. Then I saw Gazza in his wheelchair, blood running out of his nose and with cut lips. 2 goons were standing over him. I strode in fast. Takes a real brave cunt to hit a disabled bloke, especially with 2 of you, you fucking weak pricks. I kept the forward momentum, readying my fists. The pair of thugs turned. The one closest didn't have time to react before my fist slammed into his gut, right in the solar plexus. He doubled over and hit the floor. I needed to take out the other one, but he was now ready for me. He blocked my first swipe and returned the favour, his fist smacking into my jaw. That hurt. I went in to wrestle him. Then over his shoulder, I saw Gazza move on his wheels, a large hunting knife in his right hand. Whilst walking wasn't exactly Gazza's forte these days, there was nothing wrong with his arms, well muscled from doing more than their fair share. He drove that shiny steel blade literally into the goon's arsehole. He shrieked and collapsed on his knees. I drove my fist into his throat and he keeled over. Behind you, yelled Gazza. I spun and lowered myself as the other thug came at me. I needn't have worried. He never made it. Lissa's breasts moved magnificently through the air as she swung a fire extinguisher full force into the goon's head. The clunking sound was sickening. He dropped like a sack of shit and didn't move again. The goon with the lacerated rectum was moaning on the floor. I grabbed his hair and belted his head into the edge of the counter until he passed out. You okay, Gazza? Bit of claret, Harry, that's all. But they're only just starting, so bloody glad you turned up. And Lissa, thank you, honey. No worries, Gazza. Yeah, top work, babe, I added. Tough and sexy, great combination. She smiled at me. Well, handsome, anytime you're into paying, then I'm into playing. I'll keep that in mind. She headed back to the girls' change room. So who are these fuckers, Gaza, and what do they want with you? They didn't exactly introduce themselves, mate, but they were government arseholes, wanted to impress upon me the need to keep my mouth shut. Why now? I put out a few new blogs last week, obviously upset the good folks down in Canberra. Mate, you need to be more careful. I'm a bit past that stage, Harry. Here, take this. He pulled out a small cloth bag from under his counter and handed it to me. Mate, it's a hard drive with a whole lot of shit on it. Enough to destroy careers and maybe even bring down the government. What do you want me to do with it? It's only a matter of time, Harry. Something will happen to me. I'm in their sights. There's instructions in there. Promise me, please, mate. Yeah, of course. But let's hope that won't be necessary. It will, mate. Now we better sort out these fuckers. I went through their pockets. No wallets, phones, or anything identifying. One of them had a set of pick locks that I pocketed. Explained the back door. Nothing on them at all means spooks, said Gaza. Or thugs hired by the spooks. Either way, government. Any ideas? We can't exactly call the cops. I let my devious mind run wild. No, not as such, but thinking outside the square, yes we can. You got a small freezer bag and sugar? He frowned. Yeah, in the kitchen back there. I returned a minute later with a plastic snap-lock bag full of white sugar. I shoved it in one of the goons' inside jacket pockets. Gaza, your camera out back's the only one out there? Yeah, no others. Does it record anywhere? No, mate, just for watching on the monitor here. Cool. I dragged both inert thugs out into the quiet back lane. I got Gaza's knife, wiped his prints off it and took it outside. I wrapped the hand of the goon with the intact arsehole around the knife handle. I closed and locked the door behind me as I returned inside. Now call it in, Gaza. You saw two guys fighting in the lane with a bag of white powder and a large knife. That will motivate the local constabulary. I smiled at him. He grinned. You're a class act, Harry. In less than 2 minutes, we watched on screen as 3 patrol units screeched into the lane. The cops tumbled out of their cars with guns drawn. The 2 goons, now semi-conscious, were dragged away. On my way out, I got Lys's phone number.
Hey, that was good. What's the name of the story again? I didn't catch it at the beginning.
Okay, that one's called Wankers, and it actually appeared in Switchblade issue 8.
Okay.
I didn't realize Harry was in short stories too. I got me some updating to do. Oh,
yes.
Thank you. And where are we now? Let me just check. Oh, one sec. By the way, there's a little button down there where it says reactions.
Yeah.
On the bottom of your screens to the right, and you can give someone a thumbs up, or you can give them a little clap thing.
Give it a little clap. That's rude.
Not a clap, but a clap. Different.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Why are those the only reactions? Where's, giving somebody the finger or thumbs down?
Dr. Graham.
Oh my God, this is such a polite platform.
Drink.
That's why I asked Andrew to show up.
Hey, Kevin.
Rolling salts are available in the lobby, right near the postcards. And thank you. By the way, I want to thank you all for showing up here for our very first thrilling detective noir at the bar.
Yeah, of course.
I'm loving it. Hey,
How
Kevin,
could I
I'm going to have to
escape?
leave in about 10 minutes.
For those of you who have never been to a noir at the bar, this is actually a relatively polite bunch of readings. I've been to noirs at the bar where the emphasis is mostly on body parts.
We need more drinking.
Or anything that they think will offend anyone is fair game. And then that's one end of the spectrum. And then I've heard readings from people where there's they're reading cozies that are about as cutting edge and noirish as a rerun of Macmillan and Wife.
Hey.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but no one
Yeah.
would have thought that Mac and Susan were there to
I mean, I'm 52 years old, and that show was on when I was like 6. So
yeah, well, I'm
No
52
comment.
years old too, but I have more experience. At
Macmillan.
52.
Remember Macmillan and Wife?
Ron says he has to leave in 10 minutes, he said.
Who has to leave?
Ron.
Oh, no,
Yeah, something came up.
well, that's okay. We're going to talk about you terribly, dreadfully while you're gone.
As long as I'm not here to hear it.
Oh, but don't worry, I'll
we'll
take
record it for you.
and we'll broadcast it later. I'm going to have to introduce the next reader, I think, because
The next reader?
Because you
Yes.
kind of have to. Yeah, you really do.
yeah, because this is too dear to my heart to allow that Mr. Super Stud So over there to charm
Well, you
his
don't have a
way
bio
into
for
your heart.
I don't have a bio for Josh.
Neither do I. That's why I get to wing it.
I did send a bio.
Who believes her?
I sent a revised bio even.
Oh, okay. How did you send it, darling?
Email. Our usual way of communicating.
Oh boy.
Let me see. Oh, here it is under Josh. Revise. Okay.
Oh dear. Uh-oh.
Okay, our next reader. Should I give your aliases? We don't have time. Okay. Josh Lanyon is the author of nearly 90 titles of LGBTQ mystery and romance fiction. Her work has been translated into 11 languages. She is an Epi Award winner, a 4-time Lambda Literary Award finalist, twice for gay mystery, an Edgar nominee, and the first ever recipient of the Goodreads all-time favorite M/M or MM Author Award. She is the only Western author to place in Japan's annual Boy Love Novel Contest. In 2019, Fatal Shadows became the first LGBTQ mobile game created by Moments Choose Your Story. She also writes as Diana Killian and about 400 other aliases I cannot keep track of. It's like living with Batman.
Batgirl.
Batwoman. Okay. I love her like the Dickens, and here she is reading from possibly my favorite book or story of hers, Snowball in Hell. Hit it, Diana. Josh.
Yeah, whoever.
Guido.
Thank you for everyone who showed up for this. This is the
Okay,
first time everyone's reading so well. I never read my stuff, so who wrote this? This is Snowball in Hell, Los Angeles, 1943. Hell of a thing, Jonesy said for the third time. Matt agreed. It was a hell of a thing. He turned his gaze from the gaggle of reporters, smoking and talking beside the grouping of snarling cement saber-toothed tigers, and returned his attention to the sticky, bedraggled corpse, currently watching the birdie for the police photographer. Whoever had dumped the dead man had counted on the body sinking in the black ooze of the Brea pits, and in the heat of summer, when the tar heated up and softened, maybe. But it was December, a little more than a week before Christmas, and it had been raining steadily for 2 days. No chance in hell. The body had rested there, face down in the rainwater, hiding the treacherous crust tar beneath, until the museum paleontologist, excavating the site for fossils, had made the grisly early morning discovery. Looks kind of familiar, Jonesy remarked gloomily as the plastered hair and drowned eyes were briefly illuminated in the white flash of the camera. Matt bit back a laugh. Yeah, must be the fact that he's dead. Jonesy looked reproachful, although after 33 years on the homicide squad, he had seen more than his share of stiffs. They both had. This is the old-fashioned way. Though Matt had seen more violent death and destruction during his 7 months in the Pacific than he had in his 11 years on the force. No identification on him at all? Nope, even the label was cut out of his jacket. No sign of his hat or shoes. Matt considered this. Soaking in water and tar hadn't done John Doe's clothes much good, and they'd have to wait till everything dried before they could hope to get much from an examination. How much would they get then was doubtful, but the suit didn't look particularly old or worn, and the tailoring was the kind that showed its worth even in the worst conditions, which these were. Laughter drifted from the circle of statues where the reporters and a couple of photographers waited impatiently. Matt knew most of them. Williams from the Peach, Mackey from the Times, Cohen from the Mirror, and Tara Renee of the Examiner. The only one he didn't recognize was a slim man lighting Tara's cigarette. Thin brown fingers cupped the lighter against the damp breeze, lean tan cheek creased in a smile as Tara flirted with him. Tara flirted with everyone, but she was a good little crime hound. Who's that? Matt asked Jonesy, and Jonesy looked up from the meticulous diagrams he was making of the crime scene and followed Matt's stare. Doyle, Tribune Herald. Heard he was with the 8th Army in North Africa till he picked up a case of lead poisoning. Jonesy grinned his lopsided smile. Got hit by machine gun fire in Tunisia. Yeah, well, there's a lot of that going around. But Matt's interest was unwillingly caught. So he's English? Nah, hometown boy, Luke. Doc's here, Lieutenant, one of the uniformed officers said as the police ambulance bumped its way over the grassy verge. Matt nodded and then nodded again toward the reporters. Tell him I want to see Miss Renee, and he thought it over. Doyle. When he glanced back, Jonesy was giving him an old-fashioned look. What's that for? He'd known Jonesy a long time. Jonesy had been Matt's old man's partner. Back then he'd been big and raw-boned with a shock of red hair and a face full of freckles. The hair was gray now, and the freckles had faded into permanently ruddy complexion, but he was still one of the best detectives on the force. Sometimes Matt was afraid Jonesy was too good a detective. She's a firecracker, that dame. Can't understand why any woman would want the police beat. I guess she got tired of garden parties and ladies' fashion. He watched the uni approach the reporters, heard the protests of the men from the Daily News, the Times, and the Mirror, watched Doyle's surprise at the summons. Doyle looked past the officer and caught Matt's gaze. Matt held it for a moment, then looked away, jotting down a few more crime scene details in his notebook. From the tire tracks, it looked like whoever dumped Mr. Doe in the goo had driven as close as they safely could to the water's edge. Maybe that meant something, maybe not. Out of the corner of his eye, Matt could see Tara and Doyle crossing the soggy grass toward him. Tara's heel sank into the mud, and Doyle cupped a chivalrous hand beneath her elbow, which amused Matt in a sour way. Tara either had designs on Doyle or thought she could get something out of him. Anyone else would have been handed his arm back, half chewed. Doesn't look like he drowned, Jonesy was saying. He didn't drown, Matt replied. The police ambulance rolled to a stop and parked in the weeds and mud. Across the field and through the trees, Matt could see oil derricks slowly bowing and scraping against the leaden sky. What a smell, Matt heard Tara exclaim, and the other reporter, Doyle, said, bitumen. He had a quiet voice, and Matt only caught his reply because he was listening for it. The end.
Thank you.
Hey, Rich. I have that one pretty much memorized.
Thank you.
It's just a great story. Unfortunately, we had a great backdrop for it too. Scene from this story takes place in the Biltmore Hotel, which was
But looks like people are better than this.
And unfortunately, for some reason, the background works even worse than the one I have. So, okay, and now I think, Gerald, you're up. The problem, okay, David, are you there?
I am. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me start video.
You're on the second page.
Nice.
Why, thank you. I thought I'd ripped the part.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, because I had to see where you are, and now I'm seeing where I am. Almost. Okay, and I believe, Gerald, you're up?
Yeah, I'm up for the bio. Okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gerald So, introducing our next and final reader, Mr. Mr. David. That makes it sound like he runs the salon or something.
David Avallone.
Yeah.
Avallone.
Avallone is a freelancer from long line of freelancers, born to a pulp fiction writer, Michael, and a women's rights activist, Frances. Since graduating from Bard College in 1987, David
No,
has
make
been
me 7
involved.
years older. It's fine.
David has been involved mostly in independent film production as a writer, editor, director, producer, actor, etc. But in 2014, he branched out into comic book writing, mostly with Dynamite Comics. With them, he's written legendary Vampirella, Twilight Zone, The Shadow, Doc Savage, Ring of Fire, Betty Page, and Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. For American mythology, he's written Zorro, Swords of Blood, and for Kevin Eastman Studios, he writes Drawing Blood and the radically rearranged Ronin Ragdolls. He lives in Hollywood, California with his delightful wife, Augusta, aka filmmaker, costumer, and burlesque icon, Penny Starr Jr., and 3 cats who may or may not be secretly radically rearranged. David.
Thank you. Everyone else has been reading their own stuff. I didn't think it was appropriate to read a comic book script out loud. They're really not meant for that kind of thing. So I'm going to read from my dad's book, The Violent Virgin. It's maybe the 8th or 9th Ed Noon novel. And the first couple of pages are kind of classic private eye pulp fiction from the year 1957. This one was actually originally published as part of one of those Ace double novels where you flipped it over. It was The Violent Virgin on one side and The Bouncing Betty on the other side. Not all of them involved alliteration, but those two happened to. So here is the first few pages of The Violent Virgin by Michael Avallone in 1957. Rain is pretty. Even death in the rain has a pretty sound, although nothing could be more miserable or lonely or damp. But rain has lots of uses. Besides selling a lot of raincoats and umbrellas and galoshes and making the proprietors of small stores very happy, rain can drag you into the nearest bar to get out from under, especially if you're wearing a brand new cadet gray suit. And if you really feel like sipping some of the joy juice, that's just so much velvet. Rain is also the reason I met Opal Trace and took the craziest train ride of my private eye life. Opal Trace didn't die in the rain, but she came damn close to it. The rain came down on a Wednesday in November. They got together upstairs and decided to have a real ball. It rained steadily all morning and afternoon. What I mean rained. Buckets full, gallons, and waterfalls. By the time daylight died, Manhattan was a storm-tossed stone jungle. Sheets of aqua pounded the pavements, canopies all over town sagged under a heavy water load, and taxicab fleets did a whopping business. A 200-pound dame wanted her husband back and gave me $50 to follow him for one full day of work. She thought he was straying and wanted proof because she loved the guy and her fears and worries about him were driving her nuts. So I was out all day with her insecurity adding to my social security. I staked out near his office and made an hour-by-hour check on him. He was thin as a wafer and clean as Christmas, at least for one wet Wednesday in November. He had breakfast alone in Nettix on Madison Avenue, clocked in for his office job at 9 sharp. Lunchtime? Nettix again. Still alone. He didn't telephone anybody or meet anybody. I struck up a conversation with the cute blonde who typed in his office, and she gave him a clean bill of health. She thought he was a real nice, quiet guy, but I stuck on the job until he went home at 6. Then I called her wife and told her to forget it. The husband was okay for today. But I was way off my usual beat, somewhere on Madison Avenue in the 30s. In the pouring rain, without my trench coat, my Buick, or my usual good humor. I needed a pick-me-up real bad. Sure, I had $50, but I was blue from the cold and lonely besides, and the cadet gray suit was having a rocky maiden voyage. So I stumbled into this dimly lit bar on the avenue and met Opal Trace, and sudden death, and a lot of other things. It wasn't a much different bar from any other. The long polished counter, row upon row of bright bottles, a big frosted glass mirror in the usual place, and a white-jacketed bartender. Throw in a garishly lit jukebox, one monument to Alexander Graham Bell, and 4 or 5 leather booths, and that ties it. The jukebox was muting Elvis Presley, loving that girl tender over and over again so that you could hardly hear it, which didn't bother me in the least. But it did bother the girl in the transparent raincoat down at the far turn of the bar. She was facing the street and looking right through me as I walked in. "Can't you turn that thing up?" she demanded of the bartender. As I swept the rain from my fedora, her voice went right into my ears and stayed there, not in a way that you wanted to complain about. The words were soft and velvety, like a caress. My ears seemed to tingle with the harmony that poured out of her throat box. The bartender spread beefy pink hands and shook his butch haircut at her. "I told you before, lady, the box ain't been working proper. Repairman's coming tomorrow." He said it like he'd said it 5 times already. "You said that," she purred in reply. Her voice would have put a blues singer to shame. "But I didn't believe you. Now I do. That box has seen my last quarter." "Suit yourself," the bartender grumbled. He padded towards me, wiping down the bar as he came with a dish towel that was tied to his apron. "What'll it be, Mac?" "Martini," I said, very dry. He nodded and went to work. I made myself comfortable on the stool. My wet clothes were plastered to me. I shifted, throwing a glance at the woman as I did. She was the only other patron of the joint right now, which figured. It was too early. The office buildings were just closing up shop. My eyes met hers and stopped. They had to. You just didn't look into eyes like those and turn away. Her voice was one thing, her eyes were something else again. And she wasn't looking through me this time. I was getting along once over, too. Ever see a pair of glims that have the history of the world in them? You know, misery, shame, heartbreak, sudden death, tragedy, and happiness, pride, triumph, life, and comedy. Well, that's what the girl in the raincoat had in her eyes. It's a tall order, all right, but she had all those things in her eyes. They danced and died, they held you and let you go, murdered you and gave you life, in a single stare. It was a little nerve-wracking. When my martini was ready, I gulped half it down, thankful for a legitimate reason to take my eyes from her. But the action must have amused her. A low musical laugh filtered from her end of the bar. The bartender looked at me and winked. He screwed the tap handle in front of him and bent over as if it needed repairing like the juke, but he had something on his mind. "This one beats me. Came in here about an hour ago. She put away 6 stingers like they were water and still as sober as Eisenhower." I smiled. "Is Elvis Presley all she likes?" He made a face. "Look at her. Real ritzy, maybe 30, maybe 20. Those clothes she's wearing didn't come from Macy's either. You figure it out." "I will," I told him. "Mix me another one." I gave him the $50 bill to break into little ones. He made another face. The jukebox went silent, and I turned to look at the girl again. She was fishing in a large blue calf purse for something, then seemed to change her mind and went back to her drink. The tall cocktail glass in front of her was almost empty. I caught her unforgettable eyes again and smiled. The honest smile. It was a corny opening and older than H.B. Warner, but I wanted to get a closer look at those eyes. It was just possible. I was seeing things. It had been a dull, dreary day. She started to look bored, and she was about 10 stools down from me, but I'm a game guy. I had met women before. All kinds. "We seem to be shipmates," I said a trifle loudly and evenly. "Can I buy you a drink?" She sat up straighter in the transparent raincoat, and the big eyes lit up, like lanterns in a snowstorm. "The rest you'll have to buy the book." But that's Ed Noon meeting Opal Trace in the first chapter of The Violent Virgin. The Violent Virgin itself, just if anyone's curious what the title means, the book itself is a pastiche tribute to Hammett and the Maltese Falcon. The Violent Virgin turns out to be a piece of statuary from the Dark Ages that everyone is chasing everyone else for on a train, as it turns out.
Yes, anyone who hasn't experienced the Nooniverse, David's dad was another of those gentlemen who had a way with words, and his books are, how do you describe them, David?
He wrote the character of Ed Noon between 1953 and 1985. There's a few years ago, I came across some professor in the Midwest named Martin Kitch, who wrote a thesis about the Ed Noon novels. And to my surprise and delight, he kind of hit the nail on the head. His central question was this man a surrealist or just out of his mind? And I've always said my favorite expression in the world is both things can be true. And I think that was largely the case. The first book in the series, The Tall Dolores, is about a 6'1" woman who's looking for a 6'3" man. There's always it's somewhere between Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler and Franz Kafka. There's always an element of the bizarre and the strange. And over the course of the series, the James Bond craze hits in the 60s, and Ed Noon starts working as a private eye directly for the President of the United States. And then by the 80s, he did a very unusual thing for detective fiction, which is Ed Noon ages the entire period. He doesn't keep retconning which war Ed Noon is a veteran of. Yeah. He's not a 35-year-old World War II veteran in 1995 like James Bond somehow is. So by 1985, Ed Noon's an old man, and he's maybe lost his marbles. And in the last couple of books in the series, he either fails to stop an alien invasion or he's just completely nuts. And because the book's in the first person, it's entirely up to you, the reader, decide if the alien invasion was a real thing or not. Yeah. But I can't think of another private eye series that starts out there, moves through the James Bond era, and ends up being, sci-fi by the end of it.
Yeah. You could read 3 books in the series and not ever be sure if it was the same character or not, unless someone says, "Hey, Ed Noon, how you doing?"
He goes from a guy living on the couch in his office to a guy being ushered in to get secret agent jobs from the President of the United States. So it's nutty stuff, but they're all very entertaining. And I've been, for the past bunch of years since he died, I've been getting them all up on, they're all out of print, but I have 31 out of 36 of them on Amazon as ebooks.
There you go.
I actually have a copy of High Noon at Midnight on my shelf, which I understand is one of the most, I don't know if bizarre is the right word, not having read any of them, but I'll have to go.
Oh, read. High Noon at Midnight is where the alien invasion plot comes in. And he wrote during sort of a midlife crisis, health crisis, job crisis, everything. He wrote 4 very bizarre, unrelated chapters and handed them to me. And that was High Noon at Midnight. And he said, "How does all of this make sense?" And because I'm a sci-fi fan, I pitched him that as the only thing that could explain what happened in those 4 chapters. And he was like, awesome. But because he wasn't a science fiction guy, I think it's one of the reasons the book works. Ed Noon is a 65-year-old man. He's not a physicist. He's not he's not an astronaut. He's just some New Yorker with a Colt 45 who's completely unequipped to deal with an alien invasion. So it's a science fiction story written by a guy who doesn't understand science fiction, but that's exactly right, because Ed Noon wouldn't understand what was happening to him either. Okay. It reads a little bit like late Philip K. Dick, I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Definitely something to check out once you've worked your way through Hammett and Chandler and all the rest. Ed Noon is... His son's right there. I would say he's an acquired taste, but whether it's a taste you like or not, it certainly is tasty. One of the things I like about
it is definitely not to everyone's taste. And honestly, you don't write 200 books by sitting in a cabin for 10 years, crafting one perfect sentence every day.
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to say about your dad is, besides his own books, he wrote 1 million books. Like, he once billed himself as the fastest typewriter in the West.
In the East.
In the East.
East.
Oh, sorry, that's right. It
Because
was.
he was a lifelong New Yorker. He only moved out here right at the end of his life. But yeah, he wrote TV tie-ins. He wrote Gothic romances. There's a company in England reprinting the Gothic romances as ebooks also, starting with the Craghold series. But yeah, he was a guy who woke up in the morning, had a cup of coffee at the local diner, came home and sat at the machine for 9 hours. And I have never met another writer with that kind of productivity. And that's how you write 200 novels.
Yeah.
You know.
Anyways, I could talk on and on and on about all sorts of private eye type things. And you're all welcome to hang around here, and I'll just yap until the cows come home. But I want to thank all our readers that are still here and all the ones that have had to go because they have a life. Of course, we're checking to make sure they don't have too much of a life, you know. Put on the full body condoms just.
I don't have too much of a life, but I do have a dinner standing by that I should consume before it gets too cold. But thanks for listening.
For some reason, I thought you two were in New York.
No, I've been in Hollywood.
We're in my time zone now.
Yes,
Okay.
I've been in Hollywood since 1987.
Okay, I do want to thank everyone. I want to thank Gerald and Victoria for joining. I want to thank who else is still here. Emily and Mark and Andrew and Graham and Wendy and Karen and
I just want to say,
Karen,
this again sometime. So you know,
yeah,
this was
I intend to. And Todd Mason's there. I think it's awful dark there, Todd. Light up something so we can see you. Set fire to something.
I see his face in the
Very ominous.
candlelight.
In his hand, he's holding like a knife or something. Oh, here's John checking up on his wife to see what's happening, and I want to thank everyone else who's there and who won't let us see them. I do like the idea there's someone here with the last name of Bogart, and you know, just everyone, thank you for doing this. I enjoy these. I enjoy the hell out of them.
It's been so much fun. I've been there's people here who I've edited, who I've worked with, who I've read. I've been scribbling notes. I've been like waving at my husband / bartender over there to be like, no, I have this. We need to check this. So this has been great.
I do want to say also thank you to Kevin Burton Smith, not just for organizing this, and to Victoria too, but for running the Thrilling Detective for so long. And Victoria,
oh yeah,
you may recall I had a story on Handheld Crime back in the day, and that was a site that was really ahead of its time. It was basically trying to do ebooks before there were ebooks.
Before there were ebooks, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think I still have some of those Handheld Crime stories on a drive somewhere. I mean, that was fun. That was a great thing.
It was.
Y'all make the world a better place, and I'm looking forward to talking to y'all again soon.
Yeah, I intend to do this again. I'm not sure when, because there's I'd like to do something with Thrilling Detective and Zoom every 2 weeks. I don't know about another Noir at the Bar next. I would like, actually, I could put David on the spot here. I would like to do a Father's Day edition and maybe get you and, oh God, now I'm blanking on his name. He's also Australian. The guy that wrote the Rafferty series, Glenn Duncan. His son is continued.
Bill, his son's name is Bill, I think.
Yeah, Bill Duncan, and his father was W. Glenn Duncan. They wrote about a series, Private Eye from Texas, who I think at the beginning had never been to the States, but it was sort of like, if you can reimagine Robert Parker's Spencer as a shit-kicker cowboy, that's what the Rafferty series was like. It was a lot
Is that what Mark Wahlberg played?
And anyways, I thought maybe David and Bill could speak about fathers, and then we could just throw it open to the wind. And someone wants to actually join the room, so Wait till they find out it's all
Wait.
except for the hula dancing.
Too late, Luther.
Well, I'm off, kids. Thank you so much for the use of the hall, and I'll see you on the next exciting
Thank you
episode.
very much for doing
Thank you,
this,
David.
David.
Drop off.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a good day.
Haven't had
Thank
dinner
you.
yet, so I'm gonna.
Hey, David.
I'll be back for the next time. So see y'all later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you,
Okay,
Ray.
if anyone wants to say I still have some beer. Oh, wait. A word from our sponsor.
What?
Yeah. Oh, you can't see it. Okay. I'm holding up a can of St. Archer Blonde Ale. I have a feeling if he was here, Ross McDonald would drink this. Another displaced Canadian in Southern California. So, St. Archer Blonde Ale. And of course it's blonde because it's California.
You know, if I didn't know,
Let's
Kevin,
face it, Lou Archer was a saint. He was too good for this world. Cheers.
Kevin, if you hadn't told us, I wouldn't have known that you were a Canadian.
Oh, take
He's Canadian?
off, eh?
He
And
faked
now
the
you
accent.
tell me.
Did you move down here like last week?
Pardon?
Can you spot all the other Canadians?
Let's see. Well, Victoria's almost there.
Used to be.
Like my
Used to be.
lost cousin,
Oh, yeah.
Wendy
Yeah.
Victor and Karen and John Dupuis, and it's too dark to tell what Todd is, but
Alaskan by birth.
Alaska's like the part I said, okay, the Russians can have, okay, the Americans can have it, yeah. I have no idea about John. As I said, I like Stephanie's last name. I like Margot's first name because it has the T in there. And hello, Natasha and Leslie and Sandy. I'm sure they're all Canadians, so don't make us go 1812 on you guys. Because most of you would have to look it up to find out what that war was actually about. Some of you may have to find out what year it was fought even, but
Hey, I was
not one in 10,000 knows his name. Stan Rogers reference. Look it up.
Sounds like a pretty question.
Is
What year
anyone
was it?
working on something or want to announce anything? Good morning, Andrew. How was your breakfast?
Unfortunately, it wasn't a martini.
I'm drinking for you too, brother.
Andrew, come on. Rules. I mean, really?
How many of you are wearing pants?
Yes.
That's just show us. You know, you're gonna need proof one way or another.
I think I'll be doing another one in a couple of weeks. Does anyone have any preference for days or times?
7 o'clock works for me in the Central Time Zone. You know, so 5 p.m. for you. I could do 8 also. You know,
Yeah,
or
because I think most people want to be either. Like, how many of you are actually working now? Like 9 to 5 jobs?
Yeah, I am. I'm a computer guy, so get to work from home.
Legal aid, we're pulling like 11, 12-hour days. I'm not gonna lie. Legal aid is like a growth industry right now.
So weekends are good for you, Victoria. Does everyone prefer weekends?
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, weekends work.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, Mark, go ahead.
yeah, weekends work great.
Okay.
I don't know what weekends are because one day blends into the other, but I'll go with weekends.
It's all Blur's Day.
Yeah.
Blur's
I know
Day.
this is why.
Would you want to start any later?
Yeah.
No.
I only
Later.
So
This
hard
is late enough.
The international sweet spot because there isn't one. I'd love to have some people from the UK, but it's like 3 a.m. there or 4.
Well, if we started at 4 here,
It would
I
be
mean,
9
it's still-
o'clock in the UK. Yeah, it's not terrible.
it would be at least doable.
And Andrew would have to get up like, well, not worth going to bed then.
Yeah. No, if 5 p.m. your time is 10 a.m. in the morning here the following morning.
It's not bad. So 4
That works fine. It's only when you had the things at around midday your time that didn't work because that was very early in the morning here. But
Oh, so
yeah, 3, 4, 5 o'clock American West Coast time works for me.
Oh, well, maybe there is a way to get more. It doesn't matter though. No matter what time, I'm going to get. I do it to fit in the UK and Australia. I'll get someone from, I don't know, Bangkok banging on the door. You son of a bitches! You know.
Hey, Penny.
Oh yeah, well, it's so hard to keep track of these people banging on my door, even if I had it. It is.
I mean, Kusivia, right? You can do what you can do.
And sometimes even not that. I really do appreciate you people showing up. Does anyone have? How are you guys doing?
Well, I usually do my copy editing on the weekends, so I'm every so often I'm busy on a weekend, but that's okay. This is the first time I've seen Josh in real life, and we've been corresponding for
years.
2008. Yeah, since about 2008.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
We were children. We're children.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I pretty much have Snowball in Hell memorized. That's one that I've read many, many times.
It's really a great book. It's
You're not biased at all.
I'm not biased at all, but some but Snowball in Hell, it just has such a great, sad noir vibe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily a recommendation for everyone.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
There are no animals hurt in the book. Well,
while writing the book, no animals were hurt.
No.
Hey, some people objected to that. I've heard stories.
The animals.
I can't believe you killed a dog. You know, they killed 3 people in the book.
That's why we both
crocodiles
disappeared from the cameras.
Yes, exactly. Crocodiles die.
I got to drop off, but I'll see y'all next time, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Nice to meet some of y'all too for the first time. So I'll see y'all later.
Later,
Take
guys.
care.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now I need to look up all these other stories because I'm like, okay, now what happens with this one and that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I chatted this to Kevin, so I'm going to put him on the spot anyway. Kevin, could we get out a reading list afterwards of the specific things that were read? There's a couple things I know I want to chase up.
Oh, that would be good.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Actually, this whole thing has been recorded. I'll edit out the parts where I walked from the shower into the room to turn off the computer.
Yes, please.
Oh,
screen's
jeez.
Not big enough.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, it wasn't epic. It should be a cinema scope or something. You're blocking your ears, but not your eyes.
My story was a flash piece that was on Mystery Tribune, the website.
Pardon?
So you can look it up there.
Okay.
But basically, Victoria read the whole thing. So.
Yeah, no, it's flash fiction, so it's perfect for this kind of thing.
That was great.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm wondering about these people lurking at the bottom, if they're even there. Because they've been there for hours.
You're so existential, Kevin. That's like
One
so
day I have to
existential.
learn what that means.
It's a question of whether we are or are not, and what we are or are not. Mark, I have to tell you, that was me who posted on Facebook the other day the picture of your novel in between Josephine Tay and Ruth Ware.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool. Thank you.
Well, we alphabetized, right? And my husband is sitting over off camera, but he was snickering a lot. I saw him laughing like a lot while you were reading. I was like, we have one of his novels.
Well, thank you. I hope he enjoys it.
I'm seeing a nod. Wait, hang on, wait. No, you're good. I'm putting you on camera.
Pull your pants on. Hurry.
I think he's shy.
Hi.
He's not shy. He's not shy, but he says he is. Whatever.
But he keeps serving you drinks, so that's got to be good, right?
Oh, it's a plus,
Yeah.
right?
That's a keeper right there.
Oh my God, isn't he just? No, there was a moment early on where I had to mute because I was yelling out things like 2.5 ounces of gin and 1 of Rose's lime.
Sounds like you used Diane's measuring cup. It's not half a shot and a shot of that. It's 4 ounces of this and 5 of that.
You can just look and you'll know.
A problem because
Yeah.
No,
You
there's,
can't tell by a glance. You're no bartender.
There's like a drink to go with every book and every character, like the special cocktail for this book or that book. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
When I read that you'd been on a trip with Lisa B, I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, that was Scotland, which was a lot of whiskey. Just for research purposes.
obviously, yeah,
Yes. Oh, yeah. I suffer for my art.
as
Very
one does. Oh, geez. You guys, I think I'm going to drop off, but it's been a real pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for Kevin. Thank you. Thank you. Gerald, thank you.
Thank you for
This is
reading.
great.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to everyone who showed up. It was so nice. I was surprised to see how many people were here.
It was
It
fun.
was great.
Wait,
Thank you all, yes.
the reading list, do you want me to write down every book that was mentioned and story?
I was thinking just the ones that were actually read. I mean, there were a few that were read that I want to make sure I find out the ending of.
Okay, sure.
As we sat here, I bought the first Michael Avallone on Kindle, so that happened. But let me know what's out there and what's available where.
Yeah, watch out for those virgins; they may be vengeful.
Mark's story, I think, is on Thrilling Detective Horns.
Yeah,
excellent.
So are some of Ron's.
I gotta find out what happened with that whole bull thing. I was like,
yeah, right.
What's good with that?
Yeah,
I'm going to find out too. Thanks again.
We went
See you
from
next time.
Bye-bye.
See you on the internet. Bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Have a good weekend. See y'all.
Thank you.
Kevin,
Bye.
did you
Thank you,
say,
everyone.
Oh,
Kevin,
wait,
did-
someone just spoke.
Kevin, did you say that you were going to post this since you've recorded it?
Well, I'm going to edit out the parts. This is Todd Mason in the dark.
Yeah.
I think.
Where I usually am.
Edit
Yes.
out the
Oh,
part
yeah, there
where I walked in naked. But
But
yeah,
yeah.
we'll post it eventually. I'll have a link on my website, probably on the Zoom page. That way people can find it. No one, I hope, objects to that.
Not
No, it's fine with me.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to wrap it up here then, and I'll post it on Rara Avis too, or however it's supposed to be Rara Avis, I think.
Rara Avis.
You're the one moderating, man.
How do you pronounce?
I am the last one standing.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're an honorary Canadian just by hosting that list. Bill Denton was Canadian too, from Toronto, that started it. We're insidious. We're all over the internet when it comes to mystery fiction.
Okay.
And everything else, We run American comedy. They just don't know it.
Well, it is true. Michael J. Fox, Dave Foley,
Lorne Michaels, Max Sennett,
And all the Second City people.
The Warner Brothers. Anyways, I'm going to pull the plug, I think, if that's okay with everyone. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. It's nice to see you
Diane,
all.
of course, and Gerald, and that handsome
Thank you all again.
shirt. Okay, I'm going to pull the plug. Nothing personal.
Good night.
Take care, all.
Bye.
Bye. And why is it not ending? Oh, here.